Study strategy over the years and achieve the spirit of the warrior. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. These are some great words of wisdom from a famous samurai named Miyamoto Musashi. Hello, I'm Nathaniel Hedgecock, and today I'm going to inform you on why samurai are known to be some of the most feared and respected warriors of their time, by first going over the history of their lifestyle. Then I'll cover a little bit on the background of their armor, and then finally I will give you a little more insight on the development of the katana. The first area I want to cover with you today is on the history of the samurai and the lifestyle they led. And in Robert Rousseau's article, The History of the Samurai Warrior, found at about.com, he gives us an overview on what life was like for a samurai back in the old days of Japan. He tells us that in 646 AD, the Taka reform, which was created by Emperor Tenji, introduced aristocracy into the society of Japan by implementing heavier taxes, which left many people struggling to survive, while others became wealthier. Later on, in the year 702 AD, the military draft was introduced to Japan under the Taiho Code, which helped to grow a structured force that was similar to the Chinese army. It was even said the Taiho Code identified samurai as a sixth ranking of 12 ranks that made up the structure of the imperial bureaucrats. A little further into the article, Robert gives us a little more of an explanation on the principle of the samurai's code, Bushido, also known as Way of the Warrior, which emphasizes the samurai's duty and loyalty to his master until death. Now he even goes and tells us that Buddhism and Zen were likely contributors to the samurai's beliefs that they would experience reincarnation. And along with that, the samurai believed that committing suicide by disembowelment, also known as seppuku, was viewed as a highly honorable act after being defeated in battle. Since I have given you a better understanding on the history of samurai's lifestyle, I will now continue by covering the background of their armor and the importance it had on the battlefield. In the article, The Evolution of Japanese Armor, found at myarmor.com, it tells us that Japanese armor was first used around the 10th century, and it consisted of 23 or more parts that made up a full suit of armor. But today, I'm only going to cover some of the basic elements that it talks about. The article first tells us that the cuirass, also known as the breastplate, was the largest part of any armor that was worn by a samurai. And attached to it were two parts called the kusugari, which was worn in order to protect the wearer's thighs, and then the sode, which were shoulder guards used to protect the arms from the elbows up to the shoulders. Then you have the helmet, or the kabuto, which is one of the oldest parts of the Japanese armor, along with the cuirass. And it consisted of two essential parts that protected the wearer's head. And then the face mask, or men yoroi, was meant to protect the wearer's face, but many samurai went into battle without it, mainly because they wanted the enemy to see their face as they killed them. Another part that was talked about in the article was the kote, which are the armored sleeves. And it tells us that up until the middle of the 12th century, only one sleeve was worn in order to protect the left arm from the bowstring. And then around the second part of the century, both arms were covered and the construction changed in order to provide better protection against edged weapons. The next armor pieces mentioned were the greaves, which were worn in order to protect the wearer's legs. The only thing they did not protect was the samurai's knees. And finally, the cuirass, also known as the hidate, was developed around the 13th century and was also created in order to protect the wearer's thighs. But, like the face mask, samurai warriors rarely wore those in battle. So, after having covered the background of the samurai's armor and given you some more of the importance of wearing it on the battlefield, I will now move on to giving you a little more insight on the development of the katana and its history. The katana is known to be one of the sharpest swords ever made, and in the article History of the Katana, found at 2clickswords.com, it tells us that the history of the katana can be traced back past the 8th century, when fighting had changed from being on foot to fighting on horseback. Originally, swords had been created with straight blades, but it was soon discovered that these swords were proving to be very inefficient when it came to fighting on horseback. So the Japanese developed a new type of sword that implemented a curved blade. From the year 1392 to 1537, during the Muromachi period, katana swords were worn with their sharp edge facing upwards, and because of this method, a samurai could easily slash his enemy with one swing just from pulling his sword out of the scabbard. The article also tells us that only samurai were allowed to carry a katana on their person, and if any lower class soldier was caught carrying one, they were killed right there on the spot. One other thing that we learned from the article is that samurai carried two shorter blades, one called the wakizashi, which was used for stabbing an enemy at close range, and the other was the tanto knife, which was used for the suicide ritual seppuku. So now that I have given you a little more insight on the development of the katana and its meaning to a samurai, let's briefly go back over everything that I have covered today. The first area I covered was on the history of the samurai's lifestyle. Then I went over and covered the background of the samurai's armor and its importance on the battlefield. And then finally, I gave you a little more insight on the development of the katana. So just for some words of advice, if you happen to come across a samurai, which I highly doubt, I would definitely suggest that you try not to challenge them, because you'll more than likely lose that fight.